The rain fell in relentless sheets, hammering against the pavement and soaking the streets in a gray, flickering haze. Emily Carter's breath came in ragged bursts as she ran, her heels clicking sharply against the slick asphalt. Every shadow seemed to shift and stretch with the storm, and in each movement she imagined the figure that had haunted her for months, Victor Hale. The memory of his cold, calculating eyes burned in her mind, a constant reminder of what she had narrowly escaped. She ducked into the narrow alley between two closed storefronts, pressing her back to the damp brick wall. Her fingers were trembling, but she forced herself to focus. A sudden crack of thunder rattled the windows above, and Emily flinched, thinking for a split second that someone was following her. She had learned to trust nothing. Every car that passed, every flicker of light, every indistinct shadow could be him. Emily had escaped once, but she knew better than anyone that freedom didn't mean safety. Not yet. Victor wasn't the kind of man who let go. He had planned meticulously, observing her routines, studying her habits, learning everything about her. Even now, he could be watching from somewhere distant, waiting, calculating, hungry to reclaim what he believed was his. The motel appeared at the end of the alley like a mirage, a shabby, neon-lit refuge in the storm. Emily hurried inside, dripping water onto the worn carpet, and offered a quick, fake name at the counter. The clerk barely looked up, too absorbed in his phone, and Emily felt a momentary flicker of relief. A locked room, a brief respite. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to regulate her shaking body. Her small room smelled of mildew and cheap air freshener. She sank onto the bed, her mind spinning with fragments of memory. The dark basement where Victor had kept her, the hours of silence, the whispered threats that had clung to the walls like shadows. He had been patient, precise, and terrifyingly methodical. That patience was what made him dangerous. He didn't need to rush. He would wait, stalk, and strike at the perfect moment. A knock at the door made Emily start violently. Her pulse raced as she froze, listening. A deep, calm voice she didn't recognize muttered something. No, it was just the wind rattling the window. She exhaled slowly, chiding herself for jumping at every sound. But then she noticed it, a small piece of paper tucked under the door. Her heart lurched as she snatched it up, reading the words scrawled in a neat, deliberate hand. "You can run, but you can't hide forever." Emily's fingers tightened around the note. She had thought she had outrun him, escaped his grasp for good, but this was proof that he had never stopped hunting. Panic rose like ice in her chest, but she forced herself to think. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, but where could she go that he wouldn't find her? Her thoughts were interrupted by the faint sound of a car engine outside. She peered through the blinds and saw a black sedan idling a block away, its headlights slicing through the sheets of rain. The car didn't move. She couldn't see the driver's face, but something about it felt deliberate and patient. It was the same kind of patience she had seen in Victor's eyes, the kind that chilled her to the bone. Emily grabbed her small duffel bag, stuffing it with essentials, a change of clothes, a few personal items, and her self-defense spray. She knew she couldn't stay in one place too long. Each step she took could be predicted, each routine observed. She had to be unpredictable, constantly on the move. As she slipped out into the storm, Emily tried to recall the self-defense moves she had practiced. Her legs ached, her lungs burned, but adrenaline carried her forward. Every turn she took, every alley she slipped through, she imagined him following, silently calculating his next move. The city had become a maze, but also a battleground, and she had to survive. Emily ducked into a crowded convenience store to catch her breath. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing like a distant warning. She bought a bottle of water, scanning the room anxiously. Everyone around her seemed oblivious to the storm outside and the danger lurking just beyond the doors. She envied them. Then she noticed a man near the back aisle, seemingly distracted by a rack of magazines. Something about his posture, the way he shifted his weight, made her stomach tighten. She couldn't see his face clearly, but every nerve in her body screamed that he wasn't just another customer. Her pulse quickened, and she slowly backed towards the door, pretending to check her phone. As she stepped outside, the rain had intensified, and the streets glistened with reflections of neon signs. Emily moved quickly, sticking to the shadows, always checking over her shoulder. She had learned that Victor loved games. He enjoyed the fear, the chase. She had to outthink him, be smarter, and survive. Hours passed as Emily navigated the wet streets, ducking into a small public library to rest briefly. She sank into a chair in the corner, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Her mind kept returning to one haunting realization. Victor knew her patterns. He had watched her for months, memorized her habits, and now he was closing in. A soft vibration in her pocket startled her. She pulled out her phone, an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice whispered, "You can run, Emily, but I will always find you." The line went dead. She stared at the phone, cold sweat trickling down her back. The fear was no longer abstract. It was immediate, real, and suffocating. Her body trembled, but she forced herself to stand. Running had bought her time, but the hunt was far from over. Emily left the library with renewed urgency. She couldn't afford mistakes. Every street, every shadow, every stranger could be part of his game. And somewhere out there, Victor Hale was watching, planning, waiting for her next move. Her escape had been only temporary. The real fight, the deadly game of wits and survival, was just beginning. And Emily knew one thing for certain: she would not go down without a fight. The rain continued to fall, relentless and cold, washing over the city, hiding footsteps, masking danger. And somewhere in the darkness, Victor Hale smiled. Emily Carter sat in the corner of the abandoned warehouse, her back pressed against the cold concrete wall. Rainwater dripped from the broken roof, forming small puddles at her feet. Her muscles ached from constant movement, from running, from fighting for her life, but her mind was sharper than ever. She had survived Victor Hale's relentless pursuit so far, but now it was time to change the rules of the game. For months she had been reacting, fleeing, hiding, avoiding. That would no longer be enough. Victor was clever, methodical, and obsessively patient. But he was predictable in one way. His obsession with control made him overconfident. He believed he could anticipate her every move. She could use that. Emily began carefully mapping her movements, leaving subtle, deliberate traces, signs meant for Victor to see. A dropped glove here, a discarded bag there, a half-visible note meant to catch his attention. She wanted him to think she was desperate, panicked, yet the opposite was true. She was learning to control the hunt. Hours passed as she worked silently, moving through the shadows of the warehouse and the surrounding streets. She monitored nearby streets with binoculars she had scavenged from a pawn shop, noting vehicles that moved slowly or lingered suspiciously. Every reflection in a window, every movement of a passerby could be Victor in disguise. She had to anticipate his instincts before he acted. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Smart, too smart, but clever won't save you forever. Emily's heart thudded, but she kept her expression calm, as if reading an innocuous message. She knew better than to panic. Every time Victor reached out, it was a test, a psychological maneuver meant to unsettle her. She would not give him that satisfaction. Detective Marcus Lee had called earlier that day, insisting on meeting. Emily had agreed, but only cautiously. She needed an ally, someone who believed in her, someone who could help her prepare a proper trap. The meeting took place in a small, dimly lit diner far from the streets she usually navigated. Marcus listened to her outline of Victor's behaviors, his meticulous stalking, and the psychological games he played. "He's obsessed with control," Marcus said quietly, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. "Obsessed enough to anticipate every step you take, but obsessions can also blind him. Overconfidence can be used against him." Emily nodded, her mind already forming plans. "I know. I've studied him. Every pattern, every move, every weakness I can remember. It's time I make him think he's in control, while I set the trap." They left the diner separately, careful not to draw attention. Emily's mind raced as she returned to the warehouse. She began implementing her plan, a series of misdirections meant to draw Victor into a location of her choosing. She set up small decoys, footprints leading to a dead-end alley, a jacket left carelessly on a bench, the faint smell of perfume she no longer wore. Each item was bait, carefully selected and intentionally placed. Victor's presence grew more insistent over the next few days. Emily began noticing subtle signs of him nearby, a shadow behind a frosted window, a black sedan parked for hours on end, surveillance cameras that seemed to flicker just as she passed. He was watching, learning, and perhaps even beginning to suspect her strategy. Then came the first shock: betrayal. Emily had confided in a friend, someone she had trusted implicitly, someone who had helped her in small ways after her escape. But subtle clues began to appear. Messages Emily never sent showing up in places only Victor could have known, minor details about her location that were somehow leaked. Her stomach sank as she pieced it together. Someone close to her had been feeding Victor information. Her friend, she realized, had been manipulated, coerced, or perhaps willingly complicit. Emily felt a cold rage mixed with fear. She could not afford to confront this friend yet. She needed to understand the scope of the betrayal. Victor was no longer just a distant shadow. He had allies, insiders, someone who knew her vulnerabilities intimately. Using this knowledge, Emily modified her trap. Now she planned a final lure, one that would make Victor believe he had cornered her completely, while she controlled the environment. She studied maps of the city, escape routes, and abandoned buildings. Her choices were deliberate: one location, one opportunity, and a series of carefully planted clues leading to it. Victor, of course, took the bait. Emily could sense his obsession intensifying. He became more bold, leaving more direct signs of pursuit. Anonymous texts arrived in increasingly urgent tones. "You're clever, Emily, but clever will not protect you forever." She read them calmly, studying his choice of words, noting the subtle clues he left about his confidence, his impatience, and his desire to dominate. One evening, she followed Victor's pattern to a familiar abandoned warehouse district. Her pulse quickened as she observed a black sedan parked nearby, the engine off, lights dimmed. He was close, waiting. She felt the old fear resurface, but now tempered by strategy. She wasn't running blindly anymore. The trap began. Emily deliberately left a trail, a coat draped over a crate, a bag with a few belongings scattered along a path. She retreated into the shadows, watching as Victor approached, his movements slow, calculating, each step echoing with the confidence of a predator who believes the hunt is his alone. But Emily was ready. Every corner she had memorized, every shadow she had manipulated, every detail she had prepared worked in her favor. Victor followed, completely absorbed in the lure she had created. Yet she knew the danger was far from over. He was cunning, and desperation could make him violent. Hours of tense waiting passed. Victor's presence was palpable, his obsession almost tangible in the night air. Emily's heart raced as she noticed subtle deviations in his pattern, a sign that he was beginning to suspect misdirection. She had anticipated this, of course, and prepared contingencies. She knew she had to be faster, smarter, and more agile than ever before. Then came the most chilling moment of all: a call from an unknown number. Emily answered, her voice calm but cautious. The voice on the line wasn't distorted this time. It was familiar, someone she had trusted, whispering Victor's name. Her stomach lurched, her pulse quickened. The betrayal was real. The trap was now a double-edged sword. Emily didn't panic. She allowed herself a cold, deliberate clarity. She had anticipated this possibility. She would use the betrayal to her advantage, turning the insider's knowledge against Victor. Every step, every clue, every misdirection was now part of a larger strategy. She would force him into a position where his obsession and overconfidence would be his undoing. The night closed in around her, shadows stretching long and distorted, mirroring the twisted path of the hunt. Emily pressed herself into the dark corners of the warehouse district, every sense alert. She could hear the faintest movement of footsteps on wet concrete, the soft rustle of clothing, the distant hum of a car's engine. Victor was near, closing in, but she was ready. She had survived so far, and she would survive this next stage. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a strategist, a hunter in her own right, and she would not allow herself to be trapped. Somewhere in the darkness, Victor moved with patient precision, unaware that the game was no longer entirely in his hands. Emily's mind raced with possibilities, with contingencies, with plans within plans. The ultimate challenge, the deadly encounter with Victor Hale, was still to come. The abandoned warehouse loomed ahead, its rusted metal walls sagging under years of neglect. Rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening with reflections of broken neon signs and puddles that mirrored the gray sky. Emily Carter crouched in the shadows, her breathing steady but deliberate. This was it, the trap she had painstakingly set, the final stage of the deadly game between her and Victor Hale. Detective Marcus Lee had stationed his team around the perimeter, watching, waiting, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. Emily had insisted on taking the lead. She had prepared for this encounter, calculated every risk, and now she would face the man who had haunted her every waking moment. Victor arrived precisely as predicted. A black sedan slowed to a stop a block away, engine off. He moved with the calm, deliberate precision of a predator confident in his control. He had taken every bait she had left, every breadcrumb she had carefully laid out, and now he believed he had her exactly where he wanted. Emily slipped silently through the warehouse's shattered doors, blending with the shadows. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. She could hear the faint scrape of metal under Victor's feet as he followed the trail, completely unaware that he was walking directly into her trap. The warehouse was vast and empty, a cavernous space filled with crates and debris. Emily had studied every inch of it in advance, memorized every path and every potential hiding spot. She moved like a ghost, leaving subtle marks for Victor to notice, traces that confirmed his belief that he was closing in. Hours of tension had honed her senses to a razor edge. She could hear the faintest echo of footsteps on the concrete floor, the soft shuffle of clothing against metal, the subtle hiss of breath in the cold air. Victor was near, and he would strike at the first sign of weakness, but Emily had none to show. Then she saw him. Victor Hale stepped into a pool of dim light, his face partially obscured by shadows, eyes scanning the warehouse with calculated menace. He paused, sensing something amiss, and his hand brushed against the handle of a concealed weapon. Emily pressed herself flat against a crate, heart pounding, waiting for the right moment. Victor moved forward, confident, every step echoing his belief in inevitable victory. He paused again, noticing subtle inconsistencies, a misplaced crate, a discarded rope in the corner. Suspicion flickered in his eyes. Emily held her breath, knowing that even the smallest miscalculation could turn the night into disaster. Suddenly, she struck. A small flashbang she had rigged earlier detonated with a sharp pop and blinding light. Victor stumbled, shielding his eyes. Emily used the momentary chaos to maneuver behind him, pressing the pepper spray she carried directly into his face. He recoiled, a guttural cry of frustration escaping his lips. The chase was on. Victor lunged, moving with terrifying speed despite the momentary blindness. Emily darted between crates and debris, every movement precise, every step calculated. She had spent months anticipating his tactics, learning his patterns, and now it all came to fruition. Victor glinted a movement and swung, narrowly missing Emily as she ducked under a stack of wooden pallets. He cursed, anger and obsession contorting his features. Every strike, every calculated move he made was predictable, and Emily exploited it. She led him deeper into the warehouse, toward the final stage of her trap. She could hear Detective Lee and his team moving outside, their voices low, coordinated. Emily had given them signals, subtle markers that she hoped Victor would never notice. Her plan relied on precision, timing, and his overconfidence. Victor charged again, more ferocious this time, a man driven by obsession rather than reason. Emily spun, using a beam of metal to block his advance, twisting his arm and forcing him off balance. He fell, scrambling to regain control, rage burning in his eyes. But Emily was ready. From above, she dropped a series of crates, creating a barrier that trapped Victor in a confined section of the warehouse. His shouts echoed off the walls, filled with frustration and disbelief. He had underestimated her. He had believed he could control the hunt, but now he was inside her meticulously planned trap. Detective Lee and his team moved in silently, catching Victor off guard. He attempted to resist, fighting with the ferocity of a cornered predator, but the police were prepared. Within moments, Victor was subdued, cuffed, and led away. His eyes met Emily's for a fleeting second, a mixture of rage, obsession, and something almost like respect. Emily sank to the floor, exhausted, shaking, the adrenaline fading, but leaving her muscles aching and her mind racing. She had survived. She had outsmarted the man who had haunted her life for months. But the victory was bittersweet. The scars, both visible and invisible, would linger. Every shadow, every sound would forever carry a hint of danger. She rose slowly, stepping outside in the damp night air. Rain had returned in a light drizzle, washing over the city streets. The neon reflections on the pavement mirrored her own weary face. She was free, yes, but the freedom carried weight. The memory of Victor's obsession, his meticulous hunting, and the betrayal she had uncovered would never fully leave her. Detective Lee approached Emily, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's over, Emily. He won't hurt you again." Emily nodded, her eyes distant. "It's over, for now." The words felt hollow, because a part of her knew that the vigilance this nightmare demanded would never fully end. The fear, the awareness, the sharp instincts, they were now a permanent part of her. She walked away from the warehouse at dawn, the city slowly waking around her. The streets were empty, except for the occasional passerby unaware of the violent drama that had unfolded just hours before. Emily's steps were careful, deliberate, cautious, but determined. She had survived. She had fought. She had outwitted Victor Hale. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this ordeal had changed her. She was no longer the prey who ran blindly through rain-soaked streets. She was a survivor, a strategist, a woman who would never again be caught off guard. The warehouse behind her faded into the shadows of the morning, and Victor Hale's figure, now locked away, became a distant echo in the past. Emily's eyes lifted to the horizon, the first rays of sun breaking through gray clouds. A new day had begun. She had escaped once, and now she had survived. But the memory lingered, a whisper at the edge of her mind. Vigilance would always be her companion. Emily moved forward, one careful, steady step at a time, into the uncertain light of a world she had fought to reclaim. The first light of dawn barely pierced the thick clouds over the city, leaving everything in muted gray. Emily Carter pressed herself against the cold brick of a narrow alleyway, watching as the streets slowly came to life. Her body ached from hours of running the night before, but sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Victor Hale was out there somewhere, methodical, patient, relentless. She had spent the early morning changing hotels 3 times, leaving behind as little trace of herself as possible. Each move was calculated: taxi rides with random routes, disposable cash, street clothes swapped at every stop. Still, the thought that Victor could track her through subtle patterns, her grocery store stops, the exact hours she left the hotel, made her stomach twist into knots. He didn't just want her back, he wanted control, fear, and power. By mid-morning, Emily had settled into a cramped apartment she rented under an alias. She inspected the windows, locked every door, and set up a makeshift barricade with the furniture. She wasn't paranoid, she was trained by experience. Every sound outside made her flinch, every shadow made her heart race. Her phone buzzed, an anonymous text: "You think you're clever. I see everything." She flinched, crumpling the phone in her hand before setting it on the table and staring at it. Victor wasn't just a stalker, he was a predator who studied his prey, learned their habits, and struck when they least expected it. Emily knew the police would be skeptical. She had reached out before, after her initial escape. They had taken statements, filed reports, and then quickly labeled her as traumatized but exaggerating. There was no evidence to support her claims, no CCTV footage of abductions, no traces of Victor's presence beyond the notes and anonymous texts. She couldn't rely on them. Survival was on her own terms. Hours passed, and she trained herself silently in the small apartment. She moved furniture, practiced evasive maneuvers, memorized exit routes, and even improvised weapons from the kitchen utensils. Her mind raced constantly, analyzing Victor's potential next move. He would test her patterns, see where she would naturally go, anticipate her fear. She had to be smarter, faster, unpredictable. By evening, Emily ventured out under the cover of darkness, keeping her movements erratic. She avoided main streets, took back alleys, and shifted her timing unpredictably. She bought a few essentials at a corner store, scanning every face in the room. Every casual glance from strangers felt like potential danger. Every car that slowed as she walked past sent a shiver through her spine. And then it happened. She noticed a black sedan parked a few blocks away, the same type she had seen last night. Her breath caught. She ducked behind a lamppost, heart hammering in her chest. The car didn't move. Its headlights were off now, but she could sense the intent, the silent patience, the watchfulness. She had underestimated him once. She would never make that mistake again. Emily broke into a run, weaving through side streets and abandoned alleys, the rain now a drizzle. She didn't stop until she reached a crowded subway station, melting into the throng of commuters. Every step was calculated. She kept looking over her shoulder. Her instincts screamed at her. He was there. She felt it before she saw it. A moment later, she caught sight of a figure in the shadows, tall, deliberate, moving with quiet precision. Victor. His presence sent an icy chill through her veins. He didn't chase her through the crowd. He knew better. He let her believe she had evaded him. He was in control. Emily ducked into the subway, heart hammering as she pressed herself against a pillar. Her bag was clutched tightly, the small bottle of pepper spray ready in her hand. Every nerve screamed to flee, to survive, but she had learned to think before acting. She couldn't panic. Panic would get her caught. Victor remained just beyond her sight, moving with unnerving calmness. He didn't need to attack yet. The threat alone was his weapon. He had perfected the art of fear, of anticipation, of making his prey feel powerless while he controlled the game. Emily took a deep breath, forcing her shaking hands to steady. She had survived once before, and she could do it again. But this time, she had to be proactive. She couldn't just run. She had to mislead him, leave traces that would make him believe he was winning while she stayed a step ahead. She quickly formulated a plan. She would plant a few misleading signs, an abandoned coat in a deserted alley, a partially legible wallet with a fake ID, breadcrumbs for him to follow. She needed him to think he had her cornered, to lure him into making a mistake. Her own fear was still sharp, but it had been tempered by determination and a growing sense of cunning. Hours later, Emily rested briefly in a public park, hidden beneath the shadows of overgrown trees. She had managed to escape Victor's immediate pursuit, but the knowledge of his persistence gnawed at her. She couldn't stop running. She couldn't stop thinking. Then her phone vibrated again, another anonymous text. "Clever girl, but clever won't save you forever." Her stomach churned, but she refused to show panic. This wasn't just stalking, this was psychological warfare. Victor thrived on her fear, and she refused to let him win. The city lights flickered on as night approached, casting long shadows across the streets. Emily moved again, slipping into side streets and alleys, avoiding main roads. Her mind raced with contingency plans, escape routes, potential traps, places to hide. She thought of Detective Marcus Lee, the one officer who had seemed to believe her story, but even his protection felt unreliable. Victor's patience, his obsession, made him unpredictable. Hours passed in tense motion, Emily moving like a shadow through the city. Every sense was alert. Every sound, every flicker of light, every reflection in a window could signal danger. She could feel him watching, always just out of reach, his eyes on her through cameras, shadows, and strangers. Finally, she found a small abandoned warehouse near the waterfront. Its doors were rusted, the interior dark and silent. It would be a temporary refuge, a place to rest, to regroup, to plan. She slipped inside, shutting the heavy door behind her. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a few moments of calm, stretching and taking deep breaths. But calm was fleeting. A faint echo of footsteps outside made her freeze, her muscles tensed, heart hammering. Victor's presence was always closer than it seemed, and she knew that tonight the hunt would continue. She had survived another day, but she couldn't let her guard down for even a second. The storm raged outside, the city alive with shadows, and somewhere Victor Hale smiled. He was patient, he was relentless, and the game, their deadly high-stakes game, had only just begun. Emily Carter pressed herself into the shadows, alert, wary, determined. She had escaped once, but she knew he was still hunting her.